So the name on your screen is not centered, so it's actually off-centered. So it's not on the screen right now. I don't know if you have any ability to manipulate that.
Oh, I may not.
Well,
I don't know where to do.
Well, we'll introduce you if we need to. So by this point, we should be live. So hello and welcome to the RPG Academy podcast. I am Michael, and I have with me tonight a very extra special guest co-host. You know him, you love him, Taylor from Riverhouse Games. You know him on Twitter as at Leviathan Files. Taylor, how about them Vikings?
Listen, Michael, I am so psyched that we are going to be the first team in the entire history of everything to win a Super Bowl at their home stadium.
Dude, you are way too ahead of yourself. You are way, I mean, I hope so, but there's still a game that's yet to be played, and then there's another game for winning. But I was rooting for the Vikings. Like, I don't really have a team in the pool right now, and I knew you were a huge Minnesota Vikings fan, and I used to be when Culpepper and Moss were there, and even like Randy Carter, so that guy. I used to love those guys. So I kind of going back to those roots. But that last play was bonkers.
Yeah, tell me about it. We screamed for like 10 minutes straight.
Yeah, that was just insane. So it looks like we got Targris with us already. Welcome to the show. So Taylor, other than the Vikings, anything exciting going on?
Yeah, there's actually, oh my goodness. It seems like every time I get asked, is anything exciting happening, I have just a laundry list to choose from to talk about. So there's a whole mess of rearrangements at my work. We're doing like a realignment of the different departments. And so I'm moving my team under a new like manager and like processing all sorts of stuff. Working on a huge project that's been taking a lot of my time. But then in addition to that, Riverhouse Games is kind of blowing up right now. So we have our first vendor booth at a convention. We will be at Con of the North in Plymouth, Minnesota, from February 16th through the 18th. So I am getting ready for that, getting books printed through DriveThruRPG. I collected all of my small little story games under one big volume, and just made all their layout look the same. I've really learned a lot about the production side of game design, and that's been incredible to do and to learn and to go through. And then in some not so great news, Riverhouse Games was hacked twice.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing something about that on Twitter. You were having trouble getting back up.
Yep. So the website riverhousegames.com is down right now. Yeah. So we were hacked the first time, and they installed malware on the site, and then we were DDoS'd, which is Dedicated Denial of Service. For those who don't know the acronym, it's just they flood your website with a bunch of just gibberish to like basically just overload it. And so it took me forever to figure out how to get the malware off, to get it back up, and then it was up for 3 days, and then now it's down again.
Oh, that's sorry, dude.
Yeah.
That sucks.
So. And because everything's going crazy at my job, or everything's going ridiculously at my job, I have maybe half an hour to work on it at night, like in between, eating and
everything else.
Yeah. But how about you, Michael? What's up with you?
Not a whole lot. Like any announcements I have is basically that we don't have announcements. Still no word on a Catacon. Still doesn't look like I'm going to be able to go to Origins. I'm going to try to go Saturday, but I just don't know if I'm going to feel like it. I'm coming back from a week-long vacation. I'm going to be driving 5 to 6 hours on Friday. Am I really going to want to get up early on Saturday? I don't know. We'll see. I kind of want to, but I don't want to make any promises in case I just don't feel like it. I don't want to have any commitments that I would be breaking.
Yeah.
I applied for my press badge for Gen Con, so fingers crossed that goes through.
There you go. Fingers crossed.
Because they did raise the prices again, so I would really appreciate the free badge. Trying to figure out if we're going to submit for the Ennies or not. I think we talked about that on the last episode with Tanner. I'm just not sure if we're going to. I think we will, but I'm just trying to figure out what's the upside. Best case scenario, we get nominated again and lose again because we just don't have the audience. As sad as that is, even if we get nominated, we're just not a big enough show to win. So then most likely what will happen is we just don't get nominated, and then it's just like, oh, okay, so I don't know. I don't know if I want to go through that roller coaster of emotions again. Plus there's always that benefit if I don't submit, that I can always be like, well, we didn't submit this year. If we don't get nominated, it's a little bit different. So New York Tater has joined us. Hello. Welcome. I'm trying to think. There was something else I was going to mention. I can't think of what it is right now. Oh, yeah. The GM Masterclass. Those finally have started coming out. The third one came out this past week. Been getting some very good feedback on those. People seem to really enjoy that format. It seems to be somewhat of a novelty. I don't know if we're the first ones to do it. I doubt we are, but I think we're the only ones right now kind of doing it, at least within my sphere of knowledge and influence. So I have a feeling we're going to have a bunch of copycatters soon, which with our track record, someone else will do it better, and then get 10 times our downloads from doing what we've done. Because that's just the way the RPG Academy works. We've been helping people find better shows than us for 6 years now. Nice. Got a couple more people that are joining us. Haven't said hello in chat yet, but you're there, so welcome. This is the RPG Academy podcast. We're going to do a live faculty meeting tonight, which I guess we should go ahead and get into that. So this is going to be faculty meeting 122, and Taylor is basically going to run the first part. But before we get into that, we always like to take a moment to step back and talk about why we are here. So through these conversations that Taylor and I are about to have, we hope that we can share some of the experience we've gleaned from our many years of playing tabletop RPGs. But we do understand that the opinions we share and the advice we give may not work at every table every time. But there is one piece of advice, Taylor, that we think works every time. And what would that be?
If you didn't buy the GM pizza, you're doing it wrong, right?
I think that's close.
It's if you're having fun, you're doing it right.
That is correct. The big banner below us should have given that away. But yeah, no matter what game you're playing, which system, which edition, whatever rules you're using, not using, or misusing, as long as your table is having fun, then you're doing it right, and there's nothing else you need to worry about. So with that out of the way, we've already been chit-chatting, but do you have any other announcements, anything that you'd want to talk about before we jump into the main topic tonight?
Just if people are going to be at Con of the North or near Plymouth, Minnesota in the middle of February, come on by. We'll have a vendor table for Riverhouse Games. You can come over, say hey, and get the first book that I will be selling in print.
Very, very cool. Which actually reminds me, I owe you a newspaper thingy we got from a Catacon. I ended up grabbing like a handful, so I have plenty. I wanted to send you one. I just haven't got around to that yet. But
that's no problem.
I may just give it to you at Gen Con. Like that might work out better.
Yeah.
So again, for us, no news on a Catacon. Still waiting to hear back from the DCC. Origins may not happen. Gen Con's hopefully going to happen, which I assume it will be. Faculty meeting. So you're not going to that, are you?
No, I wish I could, but vacation time is pretty limited.
Yeah, I understand. It's difficult, but it's a really fun weekend. So I want as many people to go as possible. So I guess with all that out of the way, we'll jump into it. So Taylor, you were the one that suggested tonight's topic. What are we talking about?
So we are talking about repurposing song lyrics or verses from poetry at the table. So what I have been doing with one of my podcasts, From the Jackals to the Shepherds, is finding a new poet that I haven't heard of before or haven't read before, reading through some of their poems and poetry and verse, and then repurposing that. So finding imagery or finding lines or even entire stanzas and reworking them so that they fit the narrative of the story that I'm telling in From the Jackals to the Shepherds, which is a game of the quiet year that I'm playing literally 1 week at a time throughout 2017 and into 2018. So the stories so far have been, these weird mixes of tabletop description interjected with poetry that creates this really sharp image and is a really fantastic way to connect with the poetry as well as create a vivid, story at the table.
All right. So is there any specific lines or stanzas or anything that, you just like hit you really hard that inspired you to do this that you could share with us?
Yeah, actually, I don't have the specific example in front of me, but not the most recent, but the second to most recent episode. That's the longest episode that we've done so far. It's about 7 minutes long. Most of them are like 3 to 5 because it's just a week at a time in one game. But this one, there's a huge poem, and I'm going to try and find the poet.
So while you're doing that, this is somewhat similar to some things that we've done before, probably most famously synergy sessions, which is what we call when we take a pack of Magic the Gathering cards and you just use, you know, the flavor text, the mechanics, the imagery on the card, and you use that to inspire yourself in some way. So it's not like we haven't done this before, but I don't know that we've ever done it specifically to poetry or to music lyrics. I know semi-famously, if you are a follower of our show, one of my campaigns was based off of a Chuck Norris commercial that he did against Obama, I think during the first election. It was just like really thin, not to get into the politics of it, but it was still a weird commercial no matter who you're for. And Chuck Norris had said that if Obama was elected, we would enter 1,000 years of darkness, exact quote. And so I took that as inspiration and made a campaign that started, there's like 1 or 2 sessions, and then the characters traveled through times 1,000 years in the future after 1,000 years of darkness had just ended, learned that they themselves somehow were responsible for it and were supposed to go back and stop themselves from causing basically the apocalypse. So I'm a fan of taking inspiration from wherever I can find it. Hopefully I've wasted enough time.
I remember you talking about that on the show. Yeah.
So did I waste enough time for
I
you?
remember you talking about that on the show. Yes. Am I not coming in here?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think. Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I found out. Here we go. So the poet's name is. Of course, I say that, and then I click off of the website. The poet's name is Edna St. Vincent Millay, and there's this huge poem about death and like the journey through this spiritual world, and there's a lot of really sharp images of nature, and the show takes place in this mining camp at the basin of a mountain in a strange and supernatural forest. And so this journey through death in the spirit world followed this character as they died. Spoiler alert! I won't say who the character is, but
is it Han Solo?
I was able to reveal different parts of the plot.
Taylor's cutting in and out. When we were doing our pre-show check, his internet or my internet wasn't working very well.
Images and events that were taking place in this other person's work in the game, and that's been something that I've really wanted to examine because
you're cutting in and out really bad. I'll ask chat.
Spoiler alert! Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'll just talk to chat. Like,
oh no.
I'm having trouble hearing you because you're going in and out. Can someone say if it's happening on the stream as well, or if it's just me? So if there's anybody who's still watching, listening, was Taylor cutting out right then for you as well, or just me?
So Targar says it looks like it's mine.
Okay. Because you were fine up until that point, there were no issues, and then right when you got so apparently the universe doesn't want you to share this secret with us, and they are conspiring against us.
All right, so I had the stream up so I could see chat. I have now closed it. Hopefully that.
I'll feed you. If there's anything you need to respond to, I'll feed it to you.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm hoping that reduces the bandwidth that my horrible little Wi-Fi is kicking out.
We will try again. Yeah, so just start over from that part.
Am I still having troubles?
I know. I think we're on a little bit of delay. Yeah. Like I think you and I are off, but you're not robot voicing right now. So take it away. No.
Okay. So yeah, it was something that I've looked at for a while in terms of how do I make this a game instead of me just writing an audio drama. because I'm telling the story, I'm writing these scripts and telling the Game of the Quiet Year as something I'm doing, solo. So there's no other writers for the show. It's me answering the prompts that are on the card, which, for those unfamiliar with the Quiet Year, you draw a card, you answer a prompt, and that pushes forward the plot of your small community. And so it was something that I struggled with for a while, because I'm going, how do I make this a game, even if it's just me? And finding the input from poets past have really, sparked that creativity that comes from collaboration. Because, like I was saying with this passage in this episode, it's this journey through death and revelation, through the spirit realm. It's this transformative journey, and that as I was adapting it to the story and fitting things in, and weaving the verse through the plot of the episode, it discovered things in me that then pushed the story forward. So the synthesis of me writing and adapting this poem created something new. And that's something that I have really been inspired by, and it's something that I've been thinking a lot in terms of how do we repurpose old art or recombine it. I'm fascinated with fan fiction and fan work in communities, which takes established work and genres and all these IPs and characters and recombines them. It makes something in itself new, using some other story. And so that's kind of been what's going on in my head, that I wanted to talk about this with you.
Okay, that was much better. You had a little bit of robot-y, but I think I got like 98% of that. So I think we're good. So in this particular instance, you are playing a game that is heavy on atmosphere, and you're finding poetry
Absolutely.
and lyrics that are sort of feeding into that. Do you think this would work as well for a quote unquote high fantasy D&D game, swashbuckling pirates and maidens and dragons? Do you think it works better or worse for what you're doing, or is this just the application you've started with?
Yeah, so this isn't even the application that I started with. So to go back even further, the way that this had sort of started with me was I was riffing off of synergy sessions with the RPG Academy, because I love listening to them. I don't really play Magic though. So if I'm looking to do something similar, I'm going, okay, well, I can buy these cards and use the inspiration, but then they're going to sit on my shelf. But what I really love doing is I love reading and I love listening to music. I love poetry. And I was trying to think of some way that I could combine those. And so what I ended up doing is I was asked by the host of the Highly Illogical podcast, which is a Star Trek actual play podcast that's run by a friend of mine, Sam Brady. He had asked me to run a game of Fate for them, because that's the system that they use. He's not super familiar with it. And I have a passing proficiency with it. So he said, can you run this game of Fate? And I said, heck yes, I can. What I want from you is each one of your characters, I want your favorite song right now. So what song are you playing on repeat on the radio? Let's make a character out of that. And so I talked a little bit on it. I don't know if it was here or elsewhere, but looking at snappy lyrics and just things that stood out to me in that song, like catchy hooks. What was it about that song that made them love it so much? Because they obviously have a connection. So if I can tap into that, I can make a character for them that they will love to play. And Fate works really well for that, because as you're building a character, you're building aspects or setting stunts, and all of those have snappy names that tell you what they do, so that when you're swinging through the chandelier, you can say it's Dennis Moore time, or hand over your lupins, if you're a high fantasy highwayman who's coming to steal flowers from people instead of silver. And you can get mechanical bonuses for tapping into those, and that's really cool. So building these characters off of the things that they loved about those songs was a way to get their emotional buy-in into the mechanics themselves.
So that one GM says character development through Spotify playlists? ?
Heck yes, absolutely. if we want to add another layer even further onto this, one of my favorite things that I do to get into character is build playlists, is make Pinterest boards. All of these things that I've seen the fan fiction and fan art community do for books, movies, TV shows, all of the characters that they love, building these things and creating these playlists and writing this fan fiction connects them to those characters. So that's something that I want to actively do when I'm looking at approaching a character in an RPG. So definitely Spotify is one of the biggest tools that I can suggest for character development.
So it feels to me, 'cause I've never played the Quiet Year. I know somewhat about it from just being, again, in the Twitterverse when people have talked about it. But I can see where Fate would probably be a very good system for this type of development, because like you said, you can take a song lyric and make that your, attribute, or what, I can't remember what they're called now. They're tags or whatever. I haven't played Fate in a long time.
Your aspects.
Aspects, yeah, exactly. You could literally just make a line from the song that, and I can see that would marry very, very strongly in both a mechanical standpoint and also like either a symbolism or a theme or tone. I think in, like, again, quote unquote D&D game, it would have to be more with like your mindset, your mood, again, theme and tone. I don't know how well that would marry with mechanics unless you just homebrewed something. If you say if you can work in one of the lines as like a repertoire, witty, God, can't even talk about witty repartee, then maybe you get a advantage or +2 or something like that. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely I do. So there's two sides to that coin. When you have a game that's more traditional, like Dungeons and Dragons, or like Shadowrun, or any of these things where the mechanics are really solidified and you don't really have a lot of say in what something is called, you still have a lot of say in how you role play and how you act at the table. And there's two sides of the coin with that, unless you're playing a GM-less game. There's the side of the GM, and then there's the side of the players. So I'll talk about the GM side first. One of the things that I find really helpful, and I didn't start doing this until after I heard Austin Walker talk about it on a podcast like forever ago, about what he does for Friends at the Table, which is a show that I really praise for how incredibly vivid their imagery is. He doesn't write anything down ahead of time, but what he does write down is a list of impressions. So these are things like the sound of copper boots scraping against cobblestones as rain falls from the sky. So it's create this big stark image, not stark, but create the big vivid image. Have a list of those, and then when you want to pull like a gut punch of an image out to really set that scene, look at this list that you have, see what you can combine, what makes sense for where you are, what makes sense for the beat of the story that you're trying to tell, the scene that you're trying to have go off, and just combine some of those lines. And you can definitely do that with poetry and with song lyrics. Have a list. If you really love a song, write down the lyrics that really stand out to you, get that list at the table, and then say, okay, you're entering this area, you're looking at this forest. Michael, I asked you for a list of some favorite songs before we did this. You said Fleetwood Mac's Landslides, which is one of my favorite songs. So you could say you're carrying with you something that has really grave importance, no matter, regardless of what it is. It could be an artifact, it could be a wounded friend. You take this thing that you love down through the mountain, you climb down the precipice, you get to a spot on the mountain, and you turn around and you see it seems like almost your own reflection in the snow-covered hills, because of the way that the snow is falling and the glinting light off of the snowflakes, and you hear in the distance an avalanche and a landslide coming down the mountain for you, which is the first 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of Landslide.
Right.
I took my love and I took it down. I climbed a mountain and I turned around and I saw my reflection in the snow-covered hills till the landslide brought me down. And when you're writing modules or when you're running modules, something that happens a lot is box text. something to read as the players enter a room to set the mood and set everything. You can easily create box text with poetry and with verse.
Okay. So do you see yourself as the GM being the impetus for this, or being like a controlling force? Like, again, you asked me for a favorite song, or would you suggest as a player, I take that on my own and try to bring it to the table and say, I've really been listening to this song, and it's Katy Perry's Roar, and I want to be a druid who transforms into a tiger, so that's my character. Like, do you think it works both ways?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely both of those. So I talked about the GM perspective. What I really enjoy from a player's perspective is having lines written down. So there's two great games that use this really, really spectacularly well. The first is a game called One Missed Call, which is the story of a long distance relationship. And to play, you have a list of lines, and play goes until you have used all of those lines. And it's just a game about leaving voicemails, not quite connecting, and the lines tell you basically what the story is going to happen. But because there's so many of them, you can recombine them in such an order that as you're telling the story, no two stories are going to be the same.
Right.
But they are all going to follow that same theme and tone because of those lines have been set. Another game that I love that does this is Our Radios Are Dying by Caitlin Bell. Our Radios Are Dying is one of my favorite games ever written. It's the story of two queer women in space as they share one last hour of air, as they just kind of float in the void and talk and kind of come to terms with the love that they share for each other. And again, it has this list of lines that you can use that really set a theme and a tone, but you can have that freedom and that creativity to recombine them, to move them around, to really create your own story. So if you're looking at this tactic from a player standpoint, come with the lines that really stand out to you about the songs. If you've made that Spotify playlist for your character, pick the lines that really exemplify your idea for that character. Write them down. Try to use them in conversation. Obviously, if it's not the right moment for a line, it's not the right moment for a line. But when it is, that line's going to connect and it's going to deliver and it's going to be fantastic.
All right, so we got a couple things in chat I want to hit really quickly. I'll start with Alejandro first. We usually run for about an hour, so we should be here till roughly 10 o'clock. This will be on our YouTube page later, so if you aren't able to stick around but you want to come back and check it out, it will eventually also be in audio-only form in our podcast feed, but because we're doing the GM Masterclass right now, nothing else is coming out on the feed, so it'll be another month or so before anything else comes out. There's a couple things there. So that one GM was saying he was wondering if he could frame a whole game session around the beats of a single song. And I've heard of other people doing something similar, just with like almost the way that a song builds, that you can like have a scene that sort of reflects the first lyric and then a different scene, and then it kind of comes together at the end. Have you done anything like that, or have any thoughts or advice on someone that wanted to try?
Yeah, one of the games that I've really learned a lot from. 2 years ago, I ran a game of Velvet Glove, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game of girl gangs in the 1970s, and I set that entire game to Prince's Purple Rain album. And I told it in Minneapolis, and yes, I know Purple Rain didn't come out until 1982 or 84 or something, but I use the beats in that story to set up scenes, and this is where I turn my advice from "go do this" to cautionary tale advice, because just like everything else in your GM tool case, you want to use the right tool for the right moment, and this game had some moments where that tactic worked really spectacularly. The penultimate song on the album is sort of this cautionary tale about overreach and fame, and then it transitions into Purple Rain, which starts with a very somber piano music, and this end and then crescendos into the finale of the song and the climax, and that worked spectacularly well for the climax of the story that I was telling. There were a few songs that didn't quite work out all that greatly. And without going into too much detail, I didn't pick a different tool for those scenes. I kept hammering ahead with that tactic, and that's where I was saying, if it's not the right moment for that line, it's not the right moment for that line. But I didn't see that, and so we had moments that were awkward or fell flat.
And I just kind of think in general, the way that I, am inspired by things in the popular media culture, whatever, is I wouldn't want to try to take a song necessarily and then make it fit, as much as if I find a song that inspires me and then see how I can connect the two. Like if I pick the song first and then like, okay, I'm going to make sure that this happens. That's just not the way I like to prep games. And I probably would do a poor job. But again, some of the imagery, you were talking about even from Landslide, I had been thinking, like, I didn't know exactly what you were going to do, but obviously it was in my mind that we would be using the lyrics for something. And I thought a little bit of the same way, and how you could reinterpret them, that, you have a character who's carrying an emotional weight, some sort of dark secret or dark past, something that they've lived with or they feel guilty about for the longest time. And then you kind of at the end, when you see your reflection, you kind of realize that you were your own gatekeeper. Like you had the ability to get rid of this weight anytime, but you chose to keep it. And you're your own worst nightmare. So you are in fact the avalanche that you have been running from. But that just boils down to a character who's moody and has a dark secret, but wants to be in the light and wants to, maybe go out in a blaze of glory, but be a hero. So like a reformed villain who's got like, one last hurrah. This is my last adventure. I want to do one good thing in the world before I meet my maker. And, I could see trying to come up with a character idea just from that song lyric, that not really tying like the themes of the song, but just interpreting the lyrics in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I am so glad that you brought that up, because that was going to be the kind of down the road what I wanted to talk about, is really looking and interpreting what this art does, what it says, what it means to you, just thinking about that piece of art, because poetry and lyrics are art. And what can we learn or glean from this, and then, translate over into tabletop, which I think is art. I think role-playing games are a form of art. And any art that we can learn from then informs the art that we create.
Alrighty. So the one GM just being in chat made me think too, again, I met him mostly through the one-shot Wushu game that he ran for us. I think we'd actually met earlier, but that's neither here nor there. And I think Wushu would be another game that this fits brilliantly with, because your traits in Wushu are just three things, sayings, phrases. Yeah. They could literally just be song titles. Like, what are you doing right now? I'm going to purple rain this thing. I get anything under a 5 and I'm purple raining it, or I'm going to landslide. You could find a way to make it either somber, depending on your song choices, or just silly, which Wushu lends itself to as well. But I think Fate fits very well mechanically, but I think thematically Wushu, you could have a lot of fun with a Wushu game just with song lyrics.
I have never played Wushu before, and part of that is me not having people that know how to run it near me, and part of that is going, if I play Wushu, I want Michael to run it for me. You
don't want me, you want Andrew. He's the man.
Okay, then I want Andrew to run it, and I want you to be in on it.
Okay, I'll definitely be there. I can always come up with something to add, I think, to the story, but maybe we can talk to Andrew about setting up like a one-shot. That could be fun.
That would be fantastic.
Awesome. So is there any other examples that you've already done, or is like on your, I want to do this list? Like the next time this comes up, this is my goal for this process.
I would really love to find a way to incorporate all the things that we've been talking about in game design for Powered by the Apocalypse games, because we talked about it on our Masks recap, but I love PBTA games because they are such great genre emulators, and I want to be able to take genres of music and find a way to emulate that within PBTA. I don't know that I'm anywhere close to even beginning that process,
sure,
but I really, really, really would love to do that.
I tinker with game design, as you know. I don't consider myself in any way talented at it, but my first thought would just be that would be the name of the moves, which would kind of line it up with Wushu, that, this move that I'm doing here is insert song lyric or song title sort of thing. That would be a very sort of superficial way to connect them. I'm sure there's a way to, more deeply connect the theme and idea into a Powered by the Apocalypse game that has something to do with, because you can do anything with Powered by the Apocalypse. Maybe your game is built around someone who wants to be like a performer. It's like American Idol or like a blues singer in the 70s or something. So there's a lot more theme tied to these song lyrics, rather than just it's a catchy way to say I punch them in the face.
And I definitely don't have the skills or the knowledge to do so, but I would love to incorporate music theory and music history into that too. I can't remember what type of third chord it is, but there's I don't know if it's like an augmented third or a diminished third, but there's one chord that is historically it's been thought to be the chord of the devil. So it's an evil chord or like an evil music. The Catholic Church really cracked down on it and looked poorly on it. And when you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, that's some devil notes.
Is that anything like the brown note?
I can't make any promises. But there's a famous composer. I don't know if it's Mozart, but I want to say it's Mozart because Mozart's the composer that you think of when you think of composers.
Sure.
Who said, you know what? Just to F with people, I'm going to put this third chord wherever I can, and just threw it in everywhere, into hymns, into all of these symphonies, and just has it spotted around. And so that's driven controversy. It's driven sort of like weird interpretations of what was Mozart trying to say. And that's I only know that from like 10 years ago in high school when we had a lesson on that in orchestra. Just like how fascinated I was with that story. I'd love to be able to do something like that within game design.
Now, I have not played in this game, but I know we did a trial, and I think you've spent some time with Colin. But doesn't Axon Punk really combine like hip hop music into the game that the Cyberpunk game?
Yeah, absolutely it does. So I thank you for bringing that up. I would have kicked myself afterwards if we hung up the recording and I went Axon Punk. But yes, that's a cyberpunk hip hop game, and it's sort of PBTA. It uses PBTA as an inspiration, and then he took it from there and ran with it. And it's about improvisation. It's about collaboration. It's about flow, and it really incorporates hip hop as a genre of music and really codifies it in the stories that the game is telling.
So do you think there's a time and a place for you to actually play the music at the table, either as just sort of background music, or can you think of a moment, and it's a terrible example, but what comes to mind is A Knight's Tale, which is like that medieval movie that has the modern music in it.
I love that. Yes.
And so, like, is there a moment where it would fit in the game to actually stop for a moment, and maybe not the whole song, but like actually play part of a song in the game, whether it's because a bard is singing it or there's just some sort of epiphany or revelation, or I don't know. I'm trying to think of a way that you could fit that in and make it work, and not just be like, we're stopping the game for 2 minutes so we can listen to Purple Rain.
Yeah, so there's a couple games that already do that as part of their mechanics. The first is a game called, I want to say, Songs, and it's by Toby Abad, who wrote A Single Moment, the game that Reflections came out of.
Sure.
And what Toby does is have you create like a 5 or 6 song playlist, assign life events to each song, and then as you tell through the story of a breakup, you reminisce over the times in your life while those songs are playing.
Okay.
So you get sort of like the atmospheric cut through of what's going on while you're also talking through emotions and feelings as the song's playing. The other game is called Ribbon Drive. It's by Avery Alder, who wrote Monster Hearts. And that is a game where you develop a playlist, and then you tell the story of a road trip as you are listening to this playlist, and kind of what each song means. And you can definitely play the playlist as you're playing. I don't know that there's a traditional game or like a fantasy game that incorporates music that heavily into the story. But I will say one thing that I love, because I can't shut up about masks, that they do, and I've seen happen in Masks games, is talking about cover panels or splash pages. And you want to start the game out with this big bright image that if you were reading it as a comic, you would see this image on the page. You can do that for music and poetry. So if your game session utilizes a certain song, really heavily, if you borrow that song for box text in different rooms in the dungeon, or different parts of the big bad guy's monologue, start the session with that song and just say, like, hey, we're going to listen to this, play through the song, have a moment of reflection or a moment of celebration if it's a pretty riled up song, play through the session and then play that song again. And really have that bookend to the session that you have.
So New York Tater says he actually likes the idea of someone playing a bard that has no real talent, and then that's how they perform in the game, is when they do a performance, they can hit their Spotify list or something and do a little bit of music. And then to talk to Alejandro again, we do different topics every time we do this show, and this is just what the topic was for tonight. So it's not always music and RPGs. Next time it might be, how to incorporate a character that died and has to bring in a new character sort of situation. Just each week is random or different. So one thing I had, and maybe there's people in chat that can talk about this, and I'm surprised I didn't go to this first, much like you would have been surprised, you've been upset if you didn't go to Axon. I would be upset that if this hadn't come out. But could you design a game of Dread that uses music cues in a way both thematically but also mechanically, almost like musical chairs, where you have to keep pulling back and forth until the music stops, or you only have so much time to pull before the song's over, or while a certain song is playing, that makes a mechanical difference, and when the next song starts, it makes a different mechanical benefit. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really love that idea. I don't know if it would be Dread too much, but I can definitely see some sort of like teen slasher LARP, where you're playing like a summer camp or whatever, like one of those cheesy blockbuster films where there's Jason Voorhees trying to kill all the campers at a summer camp,
right?
With musical chairs, and following the structure of those kind of movies where characters get picked off one by one. If you tell this LARP or act out this game, or go through any of this story, you're playing this sort of like maybe summer hits playlist. And then at the end of for each song, you're acting scenes out, you're having conversations. When the song ends, you have to scramble for a chair. Whoever doesn't make it narrates how they die, and then they become part of the monsters.
Okay. I'm gonna put some more thought into that Dread thing, because I've been looking for a new Dread game. My Scooby-Doo Dread, it's still so much fun, but I'm thinking about putting it on the shelf. That just sort of hit me as something that might work very well. Again, just maybe like certain songs you can't die. So if the tower falls there, something different. Certain songs, if it falls, you are, or you have to pull 2 bricks for every normal one. If it's like a dramatic or eerie music or something, I don't know. I'm gonna put some thought into that, and I'll see what I come up with.
Yeah, go for it. I'd be interested to seeing what you get done.
Yep, not a problem. So I think I want to kind of wrap things up there. We do have a couple people in chat, and Alejandro specifically says he has a question. So before we move to the next section, we'll ask anybody if they have any questions. And I know there's a bit of a delay, so while we're waiting for people to come up with questions, Taylor, where can people find your work on the internet?
Yeah, normally people could find my work on the internet at riverhousegames.com. But like I said at the top of the show, we've been hacked twice in the past 2 weeks. So in the meantime, you can find me on Twitter at Leviathan Files. Thankfully, the week before we got hacked, I took everything that I've ever done in terms of podcasting or game writing, and I just made a Twitter thread that's pinned to the top of my page, so you can find all the cool stuff that I make there in the meantime until that game or until that website comes back up. You can find the show that I make on the RPG Academy Network, Game Closet, which is a podcast all about really awesome queer and LGBT plus tabletop gamers. All the project that they're working on. I talk to podcasters, streamers, game designers, people who just love games. Sort of relevant. We won't be talking about the lyrics and the poetry side of it, but I will be talking to some people who are going to be designing a musical role-playing game that will hit Kickstarter in mid to late February. That's going to be an episode that's coming up, and I'm really excited for that. So check that when that comes out if you want to hear more about this sort of music and games sort of deal.
All right, very, very cool. As for myself, again, this is the RPG Academy. So anywhere you search the RPG Academy, if you find something, it's more than likely me. If not, let me know because I need to have a conversation with somebody. But we do, normally we're an audio only podcast. We do one live show every week. This week it happened to be a faculty meeting, which is where we do, conversations like this. Other weeks it might be something else. But we have one question in particular. This again came from Alejandro. What tips would you give for a GM in I think it's a conversation trying to get his players more immersed where they are completely new to RPGs? So Taylor, do you have any thoughts on, you got brand new players, maybe they've never played any RPG before, and you want them focused on their character and getting immersed into the game? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would encourage them to look at ways to get in touch with their character that are outside the game. So at the top of the show, I recommended Spotify playlists, make Pinterest boards for your characters, write down their.
Okay, so he clarified it's convention. So like if you're at a gaming convention, okay. So maybe these are people you don't know either, so you don't have you can't do a lot of background work on that. So sorry to interrupt, but he clarified, so I wanted to get to that.
Yep. So there's kind of two ways that you can go about it. The first is if you're bringing pre-gen characters, you can definitely print out. They're referred to as mood boards. So a collection of images that really correspond to like the feeling that you want to give that character. If you Google like mood board and then your favorite character from your favorite TV show, I can guarantee you there's at least a dozen to give you good examples. If you're creating characters at the table, so if you're playing like a PBTA game or a game that has character creation baked into the play, try and really ask them leading questions. Ask them why they're choosing things about their character. Ask them what their character's favorite song is. Try to get them to relate to their character on a way that they would relate to another person. So the question, what's your favorite movie, tells you so much about a person, because that's something that they love and that they connect to. And you can use that in games as well as, just in regular life.
All right. Very, very cool. I'm having trouble tonight. Apologize. So a couple of my thoughts, and again, I play a lot of different games now, but I primarily play D&D. That's kind of what I generally go to, because I know there's all these, there's exceptions to everything, but that's a pretty general game that a lot of people play. So if I go to a convention, if I'm running games there, I always bring pre-gens, because again, creating characters isn't really part of play in a D&D game. And I try to focus, like, I don't want to teach the rules until I need to. So I don't start out saying, these are your attributes, and if you want to attack, this is a dice you roll. I just start the game. I give them like an overview. I think that's really important to set like the table rules, like a session 0 if it was a campaign. But, this is the type of game. This is the tone of game. Anything else you have as far as making sure everyone feels comfortable at the table, it's a safe space. And then I try to give them something to do that will be fun and fits their character. Think almost like a tutorial in a video game, where it's like, okay, the fighter person very early on is going to have the chance to do something fightery. And when they finally say, okay, I want to hit this thing with my sword, or I want to break this over my knee, then I'll say, okay, this is how we do that. You're going to take this die, you're going to roll it, and you want to get above this number. And because you're so strong, you get a +4 to that number, whatever you roll. And I'm going to try to just make it as much story and much interaction as possible. And the rules are only going to come up when they absolutely have to. and I may even bend them a little bit if I need to, or give people easy successes. If someone's a rogue and they say I want to pickpocket, don't make them roll. Say, okay, you're a rogue. You're able to pickpocket this person, and let them feel like what it feels like to have success as those characters before you have them experience failure. That's my opinion, because I think most people want to have fun in games, especially if they're new. Like, it's not fun if you pick up a video game and you're playing against someone who's really good and they just destroy you. Some people would probably be like, oh, I want to play again and win. A lot of people are going to be like, this isn't fun. And I think the game itself can be like that. If they are rolling all the time and they're failing things and they're just not succeeding, I think that's harder for them to stay in the game, because then they start worrying about the math. Like, well, why did I fail? What can I do to get a bonus? What could I have done differently? First, like half hour, it's all free stuff. They're going to succeed at everything. And then it starts getting more difficult. So hopefully that has been of some help to you, Alejandro. So we'll move into our last segment for tonight, which is new student introductions, because we stay on the Academy theme. And the ideal here is we take a background and a class from D&D 5e. We kind of bring them together randomly and see what kind of character concepts we can come up with. So tonight's random one, based on Google's random number generator, was a soldier druid. So this is a situation where, again, the way the backgrounds work, you were a soldier and now you're a druid, or you can be a druid who is also a soldier. So Taylor, I'll start with you. Did you have any thoughts about this combination and the type of character you could come up with?
Absolutely. So the last time that you had me on, we talked about, we talked about druids in detention, and I verbally diarrheaed all over the place about my love for druids. And then when you had me on for my first faculty meeting, we talked about shambling mounds.
Yes.
Which is one of my favorite monsters, and it's just a sentient plant. So I really love that Chance brought me the druid again to just sort of spout about, because I love them. I think that there's so much potential in them, especially paired with soldier as a background, because when you talk about a druid, or when you're thinking about druids, you're talking about someone whose magic literally comes from life itself, from nature. There's so much life and healing imagery that comes from the natural world. So when you think about moss growing over a stone or a corpse or bones, when you think about the wild overtaking a set of ruins, that a dead civilization gets life again because it's now the skeleton for a new ecosystem. You have a class that is so mired in life giving, paired with this background, which is all about a history of violence, something that is institutionally about death. So you have this druid soldier, and creating that dichotomy of life and death at the same time, I think is going to be intensely rewarding at the table. One thing the first thing that comes to my mind, this image, that might be a cliche, and it might be melodramatic, but that's my gaming aesthetic, is a soldier who after every battle plants a seed in the ground to sort of like repay the earth for the life that is taken. And so you have these forests that are springing up in the wake of this destruction, or maybe a soldier whose heart is heavy with the toll that it takes to steal life from another person or another thing, and is morally obligated to replace that life, who is so guilt bound that they carry a bag of seeds with them. You can also have like sort of a war style Johnny Appleseed, who on the other side of that, if you have someone who is literally sowing the seeds of empire as they go through, we talk about ecosystems and invasive species, species that don't have natural predators, that over flourish and overtake and choke out the life of others. The dogwood tree, I want to say, is one that is just running rampant in North America right now, because it's from another place, and it's the normal life isn't equipped to handle it. So if you have someone who is paving the way of empire, instead of salting and burning the earth, they're planting these invasive species that are literally reshaping the life and the ecosystems around them as they are, cutting swaths through the sentient species of the area.
So like cats in Australia?
Yeah, cats in Australia, rats in Hawaii, carp in the Mississippi is something that hits close to home because I live in the Twin Cities of Minnesota.
Nice.
Yeah, all of these invasive species could be something that is another form of warfare for that soldier druid. And again, I have prepared zero talk about the mechanics. I've only talked about what stories you could tell.
Yeah, the mechanics come later.
Yeah.
So I had a couple thoughts right away as well, and not unusual for me. I usually try to come up with like a movie reference, and Dances with Wolves, also known as Avatar, also known as Ferngully, also known as Pocahontas. You could have a situation where someone was a soldier, and they either became separated from their unit, they were defeated, and they were left behind when everyone else retreated. Maybe they won, and they were asked to, kind of ingrain themselves with the local population, and they come to understand the beauty of that world and either fight against their own side, original side, like they rebel, or they regret what they've done. And this new connection they have with nature, they try to make up for the wrongs that they have done in their life. Again, Dancing with the Wolves, I think he was a Civil War soldier. After the war, he just goes and hangs out in the desert, and again, he starts connecting with nature and dances with wolves. So that's very clearly was a soldier, now is connected to nature, and I think you could do a lot with that. Again, the feeling of guilt, almost like sort of the Johnny Appleseed thing, but not where it's not intentionally trying to like conquer, but like you said, they're like, I've taken so much life. Now that I understand how there's a balance to the world or to the universe, that I understand that I need to repay that back in some way. You also could have like an order of druids that are classed, and there's just a class that is the soldier. If there's a whole enclave of druids and they have an area of the forest or the world that's theirs, they need to protect it. So some of their members will be like shamans, some of them will be teachers, some of them will be soldiers to protect it. So you could have the mindset of, well, I'm a soldier. Nature is deadly. Nature is violent. I will focus on those things. And they have, they carry themselves in very animalistic ways, deadly snakes, deadly poisons, even like, poisonous tree frogs, whatever. They could sort of cloak themselves in the ideology of, this is just part of nature. I'm focusing on the part that is deadly to protect the part that's innocent.
I love that.
Again, no mechanics. Though I do like the idea of turning it into a poisonous tree frog. Like, that just isn't, when you think of druid, that isn't the first thing that comes to my mind.
But it's so perfect though, because it isn't the first thing that comes to your mind. So a druid whose wild shape is literally a poisoned dart frog, walking over the weapons of their enemies, but not the blades, the handle. And what better way to infiltrate and to take out your foe than something that's so small, just the size of a thumbnail, just like walking in and causing such destruction in an enemy camp, is fascinating. That's going to be the next wild shape that when I play a druid.
Awesome.
Poison dart frog.
Very, very cool. Well, thanks to everyone who joined us tonight. It looks like Alejandro, this might be the first time he had found us or heard of us. So hopefully you'll come back next week and maybe go back and look at some of our older episodes and find some other stuff that you like. To our regulars, Targus and I can't think right now, in New York Tater, specifically tonight. We have a few others that usually join us. Andrew, that one GM, joined us tonight. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us. It absolutely makes these shows so much better and so much easier when we have people interacting and talking on chat, and gives us things to bounce off of. Taylor, thank you again so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate your insight, and I look forward to hearing more about lyrics. And if I come up with a dread scenario, I will definitely hit you up with that. And I'll talk to Andrew. Let's see if we can get a Wushu going. Just even if we don't record it, it'll just be fun to play.
Yeah, absolutely.
So any last words before we sign off for tonight?
Go to poetryfoundation.org and just search poets, search poems read poetry because it's so amazing. The images that you find in a poem are not only really great to use at the table, but also really great things to read and to think about, to use as tools to introspect about yourself. Poetry is a phenomenal art form that I have only recently, in the past 2 or 3 years, gotten into, and I'm kicking myself for not getting into it earlier.
Very, very cool. So the last thing I'll say, I probably should have mentioned this at the top of the show, but I have been going back and re-listening to all of our old episodes. I just got a kind of a wild hair, and I've been kind of, from the beginning, the very first dungeon talks with me and Evan, and going through, and it's been an interesting experience. I think there is a lot of really good content in those early episodes, but some of our polish, not that we're the most polished now, but we definitely have more now and presentation, and it's just kind of interesting to see how the show has evolved, and it makes me really miss Nico and Evan. Like, as much as I appreciate everything Caleb has done, because our show would not have grown to where it has without him, I still like listening to their voices. I'm kind of like, I wish those guys were still around too. So, alrighty. So I guess that's a down note. I don't know.
Well,
but I'm encouraging other people to go back and listen. Everything is called faculty meetings now because we got in trouble. Long story. If you listen to them all, you'll hear the story. But they're all called faculty meetings now. But if you go back to our old episodes, we called them dungeon talks for a very long time. And then we called them table topics for a very long time. But they're all found there. So Taylor, once again, thank you. Everyone in chat, thank you. And we will see you next time. Awkward wave out. Bye. There's camera. Bye.